Hello everyone, and welcome to the Indigenous Peoples session on Conservation Day, the last day of the Congress. I hope you managed to have your breakfast, lunch, or dinner wherever you are. My name is Lucas Pavera, and I'm supporting the Indigenous Partnership for Agrobiodiversity and Food Sovereignty, which is hosted by the Alliance of Biodiversity International and CIAT in Rome. And I will moderate this exciting session together with my co-moderator, Prem Mathur. Prem, could you please briefly introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. I'm Prem Mathur from the Alliance of Biodiversity and CIAT, where I have been working for over 25 years and currently as Honorary Research Fellow for the Alliance. Before joining Alliance, I served the Indian Council of Agriculture Research for over 18 years, where I also work most of the activities related to plant genetic resources. Currently, I am also engaged as scientific advisor with the Crux Trust, UK, where we are promoting cultivation and use of orphan legumes, both in Africa and India, and has set up a very good example of South-South collaboration by sharing germplasm and technology between Indian and African partners. More recently, I'm also engaged with UNDP India office on projects relating to sustainable management and restoration of degraded landscape here. And I join Lucas, my co-moderator, in welcoming all the speakers and all the participants for this very interactive session on Indigenous people here. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Prem. And now I will introduce this session and the speakers. So there will be after that presentations, and after that, Prem will help to facilitate the discussion with the panelists, the Q&A session. And then we will aim to address a few key questions from the audience. So please ask some interesting questions in the chat, and I will watch out for them during the session. And in the end, we will have concluding remark by Mr. Frank Roy, the coordinator of the Indigenous Partnership. So for the introduction, let me remind that this widely important fact that Indigenous peoples, despite being minority of global population, safeguard 80% of the biodiversity which remains on indigenous lands. But what about agrobiodiversity? Do we really know what proportion of useful genetic resources is stewarded by indigenous peoples? I'm not aware about any precise number, but it must be very high. In fact, indigenous peoples are the ones who maintain a huge agricultural biodiversity, and by continuously growing these crops in their lands, they enable these resources to evolve and adapt to changing climate and environment. And we believe this should be well recognized and supported. So let us think about it and let us get inspired by our speakers from across the world. We have here today Professor Anil Gupta from India, Alejandro Argumedo from Peru, Molokai Mokoena from South Africa, Professor Emerita Harriet Kunlein from Canada, and Nudanai Trakansupakon from Thailand. So thank you all for joining this session, and let us start by a keynote speech from Professor Anil Gupta. Professor Anil Gupta is a visiting researcher at Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. He is also the founder of Honey Bee Network and founder of National Innovation Foundation and many other initiatives. He is also famous for his large publication on grassroots innovation. So we are very happy to have him. Professor, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Lucas, Prem Mathur, and Frank Roy, all the dear friends. I'm very happy to bring greetings from the Honeybee Network to you. And I hope that what I'm going to say will provide real actionable points for the communities around the world, which would like to benefit from whatever we have tried to do over the last 35 years in the Honeybee Network. So what does Honeybee Network do? It gives voice, visibility, and velocity to the creative and innovative people in formal and informal sector. So nameless, faceless person comes in contact with the network and gets an identity. This is what we do. A lot of indigenous people have remained unrecognized for the contribution they have made for conservation and enhancing resilience. It is very paradoxical that in COP26, we did not hear as much as we should have, that the future of our world depends upon the diversity that has been conserved by these people, often by remaining poor Now, this is the paradox, that if you map the regions which have children, stunted children, and the hotspots of biodiversity, you find a great deal of convergence. So that is what led me to ask a question in 91 as to why do regions of high biodiversity have poverty? Can we disconnect this linkage? And I'm arguing today that by characterizing the agrobiodiversity, the knowledge of the community, we can not only incentivize conservation, we can also help in generating additional income in their hand. And that's what my thesis is today. So we started some studies. My colleague, Dr. Namika, did her thesis on that. For the last 30 years, we monitored plot by plot data on agrobiodiversity. And we found, as you can see here, over the years, there was a secular decline in the traditional varieties conserved by the farmers. And this is not just in these cases that I have done, I've monitored for 30 years, 35 years, but this is happening world over, as you all know. Now, if this is the trend, how will we reverse it? What is the action plan? What have we done? What are the incentives in place? What is the portfolio of incentives for communities and for the individuals who have conserved this even while remaining poor? So there are 6 transformations that I will talk about. The first is incentives for in situ conservation through support for monitoring, procurement, value addition, packaging, and insurance for risk coverage. See, what happens is that the fact is that a lot of agrobiodiversity does not command consumer preference, as we will see later. So we need to monitor that. We need to procure that. We need to add value to that. And we need to create market-based incentives for them and also provide coverage of risk because sometimes because of drought, because of floods, and various other reasons, the biodiversity goes away. Mind you, the regions which are high risk prone are the regions where biodiversity is high. In all the regions which are irrigated, which are well endowed, where climatic conditions have been managed, where inputs market infrastructure is strong, where the landscape is also uniform, there is no agrobiodiversity left anymore. These are the green revolution regions. Now there's an opportunity. Can we make the laggards of green revolution, bring them in the vanguard of a new era of functional food and for providing nutritional security for the world and for providing the coverage for the future food crops of the country? A change not monitored is a change not desired. I wrote that in 1984. And that is why I think we need, that's my second suggestion, a long-term monitoring and learning trial. What am I proposing? I'm proposing that Biodiversity International and other groups should try to set up listening, learning, and leveraging posts around the hotspots of agrobiodiversity. So we should have a globally coordinated program of listening, learning, and leveraging the biodiversity sites. So we have, for example, a red species in the biodiversity, but where are the varieties of crops? We have no list of such varieties which are getting lost. So we need to create a new framework, a new reckoning system, a new report card that we should provide to the world, which will tell everybody as to what is happening when it comes to the loss of agrobiodiversity in different regions. And mind you, every loss of agrobiodiversity is loss of resilience, is loss of coping strategies, is loss of the knowledge system of the women and the other keepers of the biodiversity. So it's very important that we do that. And this is a very concrete proposal. And I hope that Prem and other team, Ma'am Lucas, Prem and all other Frank Roy will help us in leveraging this. Third suggestion that I'm making is modifying consumer preference and changing the shelf design and the backend system. Look at this shelf. And this is not an uncommon shelf. Anywhere in the world, in Africa, Latin America, Asia, Southeast Asia, you go to any mall, any high-end mall or medium-end mall, and you will find one kind of tomato, one kind of capsicum, one kind of onion, one kind of beans, one kind of carrot. What are we saying? We are saying that if we leave it to the market forces, market will only prefer uniform shape, uniform color, uniform size. That's not the way we are going to conserve agrobiodiversity. So what do we need to do? We need to have different designs of shelves. So one shelf will have maybe 26 kinds of capsicum, naming 1 to 26. And the consumer will go and enter in his order sheet or her order sheet which capsicum he wants, or which capsicum beans she wants, which carrot. She wants purple carrot, she wants red carrot, and she may want to have orange carrot. And then back end, all these orders that she is putting in our app will get it organized in the back end. They'll be given when she goes out to check out. All these things will be available. So what I'm saying is you need to redesign the supply chain. You need to redesign the shelf space. You need to redesign the storing system, and consumer preference has to be modified. My own feeling is that consumers are beginning to realize the need for organic. Most of the agrobiodiversity conserved in the economically depressed but ecologically rich region are also organically conserved, and the market for organic is growing. So how do we create that? How do we generate interest? You know, there is a saying, the food scientists tell us that if you take fruits or vegetable of 5 colors, your nutritional needs are met. Agrobiodiversity has that richness of diversity, of colors, of shapes, of sizes, but our market system has nullified it. So we need to counteract that and take note of it. And all the major brands, all the major malls in the world, we'll have to bring them on board as a partner in this task so that they agree to contribute to the conservation. We cannot do it alone. We need the partnership of these corporations. The fourth point that I'm trying to make is extremely important and something on which we have spent a lot of time. Characterization of nutritional and functional food characteristics of low value, high impact crops. What does it mean? Let me take a very simple example. Flax seed. Flax seed would sell for about $2 for 100 kg. Some years ago, it was fed to the horses. Very low value crop. Once it was characterized and it was found that it has, on my table, I keep flax seed, if you can see that. Now, this flax seed has very high 3-omega fatty acid, which vegetarian people and also others do not get from their food enough. Merely by characterizing, no value addition, just characterization. And the value went up to about $1.50 for 100 grams. What was the price of 1,000 grams has now become the price of 100 grams. 10 times increase in the value, 10 times increase in the value just by characterizing the flax seed. This is the power of characterization. This is the power of modern science and technology. This is the power of science being blended, formal science being blended with the knowledge system of people. People knew that. Local communities knew that. Indigenous people knew that. What is the advantage of this grain? But we didn't listen to them for such a long time. Now that we have started listening to them, it is now possible. So what do we need to do that? We need to have mobile food labs. And we must ensure that when we take the knowledge of the people, they must become co-author of the findings. They must become the owner of the patentee. We have filed more than 1,200 patents. All the patents in the name of the innovator. Farmer varieties have been protected under the Protection of Plant Variety and Farmers' Right Act, all in the name of these communities and the people. So it's very important that we recognize them. We should not usurp the benefit of their knowledge. For all these years in pulses, in oilseeds, as Prem knows, most of the selections were made from the farmers' varieties and they remain anonymous. We will not let this happen anymore. I think we should resolve in this conference that whenever a farmer's selection is used for any breeding program, a benefit sharing system must be developed. Those communities must get their due share in the contribution that they are making for development of the high-yielding varieties, functional foods, as I gave example of flax seed and many other such examples. Now, that brings me to the fifth point. Linking soil, crop, animal, and human health. We did a study. We took 2 villages after a survey where chronic diseases were high. And we took 2 villages where chronic diseases were low. And then we did a study of soil nutrition, we did crop nutrition, animal health, animal blood was analyzed, and we took the human volunteers who contributed their samples of blood for analysis. We were trying to link the minerals in the soil right up to the human food. Why did we do that? so that the regions which have soils rich in certain minerals, the crops grown in those regions will become functional food. So let's say there was a study, I gave this talk at the World Food Congress many years ago, that a study found that in Africa, those villages which had high incidence of arthritis versus villages which had low incidence of arthritis, one major difference was the corn varieties, where the traditional varieties of corn were consumed, the chances of chronic disease, of arthritic disease was 1/4 of the villages where hybrid maize was consumed. And what was the contributing factor? Boron was the contributing factor. So let's say there are soils rich in boron. Shouldn't the crop grown in those regions which mobilize boron from the soil become functional food for those people who are affected by this deficiency, and thereby the people will get more income without having to use fertilizer and pesticide for what they grow, just as in case of flax. So therefore, we must use this, the characterization of the soil health and its transportation, soil minerals to the crop, and human and animal health must become a very major means of empowering indigenous communities, which often live in the rain-fed regions. And mind you, the regions which are rain-fed have low leaching of soil minerals. You know, it's very interesting because the soil, the nature has not designed the channels for draining of these minerals. They are very rich. So crop grown by the indigenous people in the rain-fed regions particularly are rich in minerals, but they don't get value today. That it becomes commodity and everything is mixed together in the marketplace. No, we need to develop separate supply chains for them to give them benefit of what they have conserved and have contributed for the health of the world at large. That brings me to the last point in this regard. The institutions, and the women's knowledge is very critical. There is a variety, Oryza perennis point. Many of you know that. It has also been the source of male sterile lines in paddy. Now this is grown, this is conserved in Eastern India, and the poorest people collect it from the water and consume. This is very costly for certain rituals, for certain cultural festivals. This rice is required, wild relative is required. Now the question is that it has contributed so much to the modern food system security, and yet the communities which conserve this have remained poor. So how do we use the knowledge of women, particularly because they pay attention to not only the crops, but also the weeds that grow in the crop season. They have utility for each crop. And Dr. Anamika found in her thesis this kind of linkages between the weeds and the crops. So what does future hold for us? Future belongs to the network. Network is the new gold. We need to create knowledge networks. We need to create learning, listening, learning, and leveraging post network. And we need to create networks which will link innovation, investment, enterprise. Imagine a variety from India gets an investor invests in the value chain of a variety or a crop from India and provides food inputs for Africa or Latin America or vice versa. We can make a global value chain. This is what GAN's Golden Triangle, when we set up GAN in 97, this was our purpose. How to link innovation, investment, enterprise. They all three may not be in one place or one community, obviously not. So the people, the communities need access to investment. They need access to entrepreneurial value chains because they have knowledge and they have creativity. And we need to provide this networking support. So I would conclude by saying that the Honeybee Network has tried to provide how creativity and knowledge system of the local communities can become a pivot for transforming the options, the developmental options, the conservation options, the economic options, and of course, the cultural creativity of the people by linking their knowledge system with entrepreneurial and investment system. Creativity counts, knowledge matters, innovations transform, and incentives inspire not just material incentive, but also non-material incentive, and not just individual incentive, but also collective incentives. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Anil Gupta. It was a very inspiring talk with so many important ideas. I really like that idea of long-term monitoring and learning plots or stations in agrobiodiversity. It sounds very interesting. And also the connection of the soil health with human health was very interesting that you observed. And lastly, the power of networks. That was a very nice concluding point. So thank you so much. And now we will have Alejandro Argumedo. And Alejandro Argumedo is director of the association Andes, a Cusco-based indigenous peoples NGO working to protect and develop Andean biological and cultural heritage, and also to protect the rights of indigenous peoples of Peru. He's also the international coordinator of the Indigenous Peoples Biodiversity Network and senior research officer for Peru of the Sustaining Local Food Systems, Agriculture, Biodiversity and Livelihoods Program of the International Institute for Environment and Development, or UK. So, Dr. Francisco Alejandro Argumedo, floor is yours.
Everyone, it's my pleasure to join this fellow's group, and it is actually as usual very inspiring to listen to my friend Anil. I'm kind of a little bit bored here, but I think I'll be Anil. I know Anil for a long time, so I repeat, it's inspiring. However, I think the situation these days in the world with the pandemic, food, the industrial food system, the cost.
The sound is getting your video, your sound might improve, Alejandro. If you switch off your video, your sound may improve. Hello, your video, your sound might improve, Alejandro. If you switch off your video, your sound may improve.
Alejandro, you can switch off your video.
Okay.
So we can hear you better maybe without video.
Yeah, it was I was doing this okay, but I'm having right now problems with the
Alejandro, I think your connection is very bad at the moment. Maybe your connection is very bad at the moment. Maybe to the other speaker and then try to get back to you. Yeah. So apologize for that, but we can continue now with Ms. Molokai Mokoena, who is a proud African woman who has committed her work to improving agriculture by integrating it with scientific innovation and work with the communities. Her interest is also in improving sustainable rural livelihood programs through research interventions. Ms. Mokoena is currently employed as a scientific manager and the head of unit for plant genetic resources at the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development in South Africa. Moreover, she is a member of the South African Society for Crop Production, and her presentation will show her experience with community seed banks. So please, the floor is yours now.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Lucas, for the introduction. Yes, as it has been mentioned, I'm representing the South African just to show and share globally what is it that we are trying to make to improve the livelihoods of our rural farmers, and also to make sure that at the ultimate end, they also get into the world of being called commercializing farmers. South Africa, briefly, it's a rich country that has a variety of PGRs, many of which we are using the arable land to do our agricultural production. The Department of Agriculture in South Africa is the leading sector in making sure that the PGRFA programs are being well coordinated and answering the call of the second global plan of action. The department developed a national plan whereby within the national plan, it was addressing one of the important priorities, which was supposed to addressing community seed banks as one of the important storage or revitalization to improve the local systems. So in one of our mandates whereby South Africa was taking lead in this was to make a tour to check with provinces various and in many districts and choose a community that will be having these community seed banks to practice their conservation. So choosing a Gumbu community seed bank was one of the achievement that South Africa came up with because of the situation of its rich and high diversity. So these are the functions of the community seed banks, whereby it was supposed to be taking us through into how should these community seed banks be coordinated, and also involving the farmers who should be the conservation, who should be having the knowledge of how to provide good access and quality of seeds. Also, how best can platforms for saving the community development in terms of how seeds should be restored and revitalized should be happening. And at the end of the day, it should be now showing, as you can see on my screen, the storage itself, where the quality we are talking about and trying to emphasize from the multiplication trials that they have below there. And moving forward, we have now a task whereby we should be establishing these community seed banks. The community seed banks, you wouldn't just go to a community and just introduce or impose something that the community won't be happy of or interested on. Consultations were made in collaborations with the PDAs, which we call the Departments of Agriculture within the country, whereby we had now the role of engaging the tribal authority to seek their leadership and support to buy in onto this new creativity or new innovations of community banks that we are trying to bring in. And also, most importantly, to get the land, to acquire the land whereby the farmers will be building or structuring these community seed banks. Also to learn more about their cultural norms and beliefs, when to do what, when to plant, what kind of a crop, when do they really prefer these crops to be practiced, and also to get the support from the community members themselves, and also encourage the participation of the farmers if there will be a buy-in, which will not be a problem once you have a good engagement of the tribal authority. This was a structure whereby the establishment of community bank was moving or riding with. We had the collaboration of the three sectors. As you can see, it was the NPGRC, which is the National Gene Bank of South Africa, the Biodiversity International, including the PDAs, whereby we had now to make consultations with the traditional authorities to gain as to how will we go about introducing the community bank. The Gumbu Community Seed Bank was initially introduced with a feasibility study that started in 2013, as you can see, and was formally launched in 2017. A feasibility study that included a whole lot of steps to be taken during the transact, the 4-cell analysis, the diversity, to check as to how feasible and needy. Is there any need of us having a community seed bank in this particular village? Will there be any buy-in as far as the community seed banks is concerned? That's also important in getting the buy-in and the low-in where community seed banks had to make a little training on seed bank management by introducing this 4-cells analysis. And as you can see on your far right, there are the practices whereby the farmers were grouped and they were bringing their own variety of crop land races that they had, and we do our 4-cell analysis with the transact work that has been done to check as to how much diversity is it in a particular village. And thus far, in establishing our community seed bank in Gumbu, we ultimately had 30 women, with 8 of them making a committee. And currently, as we speak, as you will be seeing throughout my presentation, we are currently housing 218 accessions in the communities bank. This is just to show you the structure, with the lovely farmers being happy right there, and the seed that has been stored in the community bank itself. And this is just to illustrate and show you the high ranking of the crops as they are being preferred with the farmers that they have in the same community seed bank. I would not, make mention of them all, but just those highlighted in green to show you which ones they prefer most and the ones that they are able to restore. And these are the TKs that I would like to share with you among these farmers as you go on with them, trying to introduce these things from them. We have also to notice that you have to take cognition of or realize the important indigenous knowledge that they have, whereby they also have the way of treating the seeds. They also have the way of selecting the seeds of them as to what is it that is important for them to plant the next coming growing season, and also the beliefs that they have depending on the crop. I'll take Bambara for an example. In Gumbu, they will say you shouldn't be planted while girls or women are standing. They should be all seated, and also to make sure that all these beliefs are being taken note of. And they have also different uses of these crops and how they prefer them. Also, as we go down, we have also, in one of the indigenous that they have made the seed exchange, the exchange on traditional recipe books that we have introduced through the Gumbu Community Bank, and also through their interchanging and displaying of foods. They have had great moments where they were sharing their knowledges, and these are different members of community seed banks that we have, but whereby the displaying have been in Gumbu itself. And also this is the indigenous recipe book that I was talking about, being created from their food itself. And hence the last one here showing the seed exchange. And also with that being said, we have the on-farm multiplication, whereby they are good in displaying or in planting their own seeds, whereby this very same seed, they conserve back into the community seed bank. And you can see farmers also prefer their mixed cropping systems, whereby we did not say no, plant in rays or plant in rows that are consistent, because they have their own aim of achieving what they want to achieve at the end. And as scientists, it's just for us to embrace that. And the training and workshops that has been introduced to the community seed bank was through also engaging the extension officers and to guide them and train them on CSB management, whereby we are making them to learn on how to register, document their own material, also moving away a little bit or to incorporate with their traditional knowledge to use the silicon beads, and also to make use of the diversity wheel, which was once been taught to them when they're initiating the community seed bank by a cell, and also how to process and make sure that the handling of their materials for purification is good. And to make sure that we wanted to strengthen and make sure that the technical support is being, continuing. There was a tour that South Africa took to Zimbabwe, where to learn how best can we improve what our farmers did or what our farmers are doing at community seed banks. We learned that practicing the participatory plant breeding is very much important. Having the farmers field where farmers almost normally gather and share their special traits on what they want to improve as far as their land races are concerned is also one thing that we should introduce. And also to make sure that collaboration, not only with the Department of Agriculture as a whole, but to involve everyone in the village, in the communities bank, and the government at large. And also to make sure that the policymakers also include and realize the importance of conservation of PGRFA, and to make sure that farmers as much as well as officials are being trained well to accomplish the success of community seed banks. Also, with the collaboration, after gaining the strength, gaining the importance of PBB in Zimbabwe, we came back and implement the same teachings that we had from Zimbabwe by conducting a survey with our farmers to allow them to choose the crops that they prefer with their high traits. As you can see, the drought tolerance, the high yielding, and the pest disease, because we wanted to address the challenges that are coming with climate change. And also at the ultimate end, to get the high value nutritional crops that these farmers are having at their fields. As you can see, this is just the trends to show where we started with the gumbo as it was initially, and as it goes, we went like that. And this is where we are at the 218. But as you can see, between 2019 and 2021, because we had the strike of the challenge of the COVID-19, we had to go down a little bit from 235 to 218. The challenges that we encountered, as you know, we cannot flow, was that the farmers are still lacking resources such as, getting to be having incentives or income to have resources such as irrigation, also to make sure that they maintain their community seed banks to be in good operational, because Gumbo also is on the other drought area of our country. We have a situation whereby they will be planting late, or there will be no planting because of shortage of rainfall. So this is where now the government has to come in and engage and make sure that such are being addressed. And also the drastic one, which we have just been realizing, all of us, the limited technical support that we were provided to community banks due to COVID-19 challenges. The lessons that we have learned from Gumbo was that we should make sure that we listen to farmers. We should have good approaches for better adaptation and adoption of new innovations. Less usage of our scientific approach, not really to impose on farmers, but to incorporate their TKs, their traditional knowledge into what we want them to adapt and move for the success of each and every innovation or aspect that we are trying to introduce. Speak the language of the farmers, which is the most important thing that we have learned. And with that, I would like to acknowledge all the departments or the organizations that we are seeing on the screen. Most of all, I would like to acknowledge the buy-in and the commitment that the Gumbo farmers had in making sure that this community bank is a success and it is where it is today. With that being said, I would like to thank the organizers of this Congress and also seeing the opportunity to invite South Africa to come and share the teachings that they have had as far as agrobiodiversity is concerned. I thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your great experience with community seed banks and for highlighting also the importance of indigenous knowledge on different seed varieties and how this knowledge and seed resources can be conserved and shared. Also, at the end, the importance to speak the language of the farmers was a very practical suggestion. So thank you very much. And now we will fly to northern Thailand, and we will have our colleague and former TIP fellow, Nudenai Trakansupakon, and you may call him also simply Jump. He's from a Pakenkaya tribe, which belongs to the Karen Indigenous Peoples in northern Thailand. He worked with indigenous youth in local community through the angle of social enterprise, based on indigenous traditions and wisdom. He has created a social enterprise brand in the community named Host Beehive, Wild Honey Product, and Little Farm in Big Forest, focusing on seasonal products. His main goal is to create agrobiodiversity-based livelihood for indigenous youths so that they stay in the community and become proud of their own knowledge and identity. And Jump will talk about the linkages of agrobiodiversity, livelihood, and climate change. So Jump, we are ready for your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucas. Okay, hello everyone. My name is Nadanai. You can call me Jam in the short name, and I'm from Thailand. Today I will talk about rotational farming. We work in the current communities in the north of Thailand. In the first, I want to introduce about rotational farming, shifting cultivation. We do in the current communities is a main traditional agricultures we do, and this already have done for the 1,000 years, and it proved that our ecosystem always rich, and rotational farming create our food security system based on self-reliance, and rotational farming is based on 1 year cultivation and long fallows between 7 to 10 years fallows, and fallows regenerate naturally, create good soil, space of wildlife, and a variety of biodiversity. And in this one, uh, in rotational farming, we have a one process is a slash and burn. But some people they don't understand. They see like we cut the forest, we destroy the forest. But you can see in this article, we in National Geographic, they 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 come to our community in Hilanai village in Thailand. They call like these farmers slash and burn forest, but in the good way, because we have a traditional knowledge to support this process. When before we do the slash and burn, we do the fire break, we control the fire, the burning, and we do this process like this because we the charcoal of when we burn is a very good fertilizers. And in rotational farming, we not use pesticides and chemical fertilizers. You can see the tree after the tree cut. You can see in the right picture, uh, it come out again, and in next 2 3 months it be green again, and it the area will regrowth of plant and biodiversity in that rotational farming. Uh, we have a lot of research to support rotational farming is a good practice and sustainable mechanism to manage natural resource, including carbon storage in the fallow land. You you can see this is research that is do in Hilanai village is a rotational farming. Mitigation of carbon only 438 tons, but the carbon storage of rotational farming in and fallow land is 17,000 ton. We do. And when we do the about the rotational farming practice in the community, we start to think about the food security in the rotational farming, and we do like the the mapping of food, the seasonal calendar in the community. We found one field of rotational farming. We have around 117 species inside one field, and it can support the people in community have food uh, around the year to eat like in the seasonal food. And in the fallow land of rotational farming, we not only live, but we have a natural product to do the beekeeping and others product in the fallow land. It means in fallow land have a very rich biodiversity. Some of tree create a value product of consumption and sell for the income too. Like this in this picture, we do like a Sweden honey. It's a rotational farming honey. We do the box easy box in the fallow land, and we have a very special honey and very good taste. And we think rotational farming have a lot of food. And how about the income? Because now in this situation, we have food, but some of the young people, they not have job, not have income, they go out to outside. We do this mechanism to create social enterprise in indigenous communities, and we have like a young people and women come to create together like that. And we start to decide what we have in the community based on traditional knowledge and identity by the youth and the women group in the communities, and we put the storytelling of our knowledge through product to make people in the urban understand about what we do in the community, because the great communication is we need use food to connect the people in community with the people outside like that. And this is a very important thing, is we make a space like a cultural camp, and we create a local curriculum to put in a school in the communities, and we invite the elders come and share about the traditional knowledge in the field with the young people. And this is last year we do about we call Let's Go Home cartoon projects. We have the Karen Drover cartoons come and do like the story of a rotational farming in the cartoon and put in the local curriculum, and you can see this in the school like that. And when we do the work of a social enterprise, we have a network of a social enterprise, and we collaborate with the people outside to do the brand name Taste from the Root network. This Taste from the Root is we want to communicate a story of traditional knowledge, but how? And we use a product to communicate, like we have a rice in rotational farming, some herb of rotational farming, but sometimes the people outside they don't know how to eat. We collaborate, like in this picture, we collaborated with a bread makers brand to do like a rotational crackers, and we use the rice from rotational farming. We have herb from our forest, and you can see the packaging have a map of Thailand, and you can see where the ingredients come like that, and have a name of communities inside the packaging, and you can scan QR code to link and see what we do in the communities like that. And the last one is, this one is a start when the COVID come. um Now we use online a lot, and we need to send the product from the communities, and we start to think not only to do the packaging, but we when we put the product in the box and send by the local logistic, we need like a natural shock proof, and we have the banana trees in the communities, and we use a banana stock to dry it and cut like in these pictures and add value it. Now have the social enterprise network use this product too to like because this can be like a zero waste product in the communities. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Jam. That was great. And thank you for sharing your knowledge on traditional farming of indigenous current communities. And that rotational agriculture, if done traditionally by indigenous communities, can be sustainable, very rich in agrobiodiversity, and it also has a high capacity to sequester carbon. It was also great to see that you can develop livelihood for youths based on honey and other local products. And I would like to try the rotational crackers. So thank you very much. And now we will have Professor Emerita Harriet Kunlein. She's a nutritionist and founding director of the Center for Indigenous Peoples, Nutrition and Environment, SINA, and Professor Emerita at McGill University in Montreal. Dr. Kunlein is also a fellow of the American Society for Nutrition, a fellow of the International Union of Nutrition Sciences, and an honorary member of the Canadian Nutrition Society. Her research spans more than 45 years and has included participatory research with many cultures of indigenous peoples in North America and several other parts of the world. So we are very honored to have you, Harriet. Please share with us your wisdom.
Thank you. Thank you, Lucas, and hello, everyone. I'm speaking to you from Anacortes, the traditional territory of peoples now part of the Swinomish Indian tribal community and the Samish tribe. I'll give some perspective on food biodiversity and conservation from Indigenous peoples in the United States and Canada. So I'm trying to make the full screen here, but it doesn't allow me to do that at this point. So I'll just leave it there with the slides on the side. So within Canada, there are 1.7 million Indigenous peoples on record with about 70 languages. There are major cultural divisions as First Nations, Métis, and Inuit. In the United States, there are 3.7 million or 1.1% of the population as American Indians, Alaska Natives, and Native Hawaiians, speaking about 175 different languages. So as you can imagine, this is a huge, vast territory with diverse ecosystems and cultures and extensive biodiversity, from the Arctic North to the desert Southwest and Pacific Islands. In Canada alone, research documents that are linked here show about 530 species of food animals and about 1,000 species of plant foods. Interview data over many years documents consistent key cultural concepts for harvest and use of traditional food. It gives identity and culture, it's tasty and fresh. People report that it helps with their fitness and recreation and gives them healthy and nutritious food that keeps them in tune with nature. It saves money, favors sharing, brings respect and pride, and contributes to education of children. In counterbalance, here and everywhere in the Indigenous world, there are threats to food system resources. Most significantly is dispossession of land and resources by outsiders, including overharvesting and trespassing restrictions, climate change, habitat destruction and environmental insults, the loss of wildlife, plants, and animals, both in numbers of species and within species, and loss of agricultural varieties. There also have been residential schools and urbanization and employment that keeps people away from their food, increasing the use of commercial food that leads to chronic disease. But many Indigenous peoples in the US and Canada are protecting their resources with education efforts. Here are 4 examples and a link describing them. The first on the top left is from the Nuhulk Nation in British Columbia, where the community created a program with many activities to use their food, including creating this handbook and recipe book. The Hopi tribe in Arizona created a book of native plant species. The Western Apache distributes a lunar harvest calendar for traditional foods, and the Swinomish in Washington state have books describing how the lunar phases guide traditional food activities. All these food system documentations are shared in the tribal schools, and it's happening more and more often. Now, this is the story of the ulakan, an iconic traditional food fish of the Nuhulk Nation in Canada. The anadromous fish appear in the local river in early spring. You can see the snow on the mountains on the picture on the left. And the fish are heralded by a swarm of seagulls that swarm over it in the first run into the river. The fish are netted and placed in bins to ripen for 10 days or so until they're ready to gently cook to release their oil from the tissues. And this oil is highly rich in vitamins and healthy fats. It's strained and used throughout the year by families. Large bins can yield up to 400 liters of the oil that is shared among families and considered a precious resource that is used in many ways. The fish are also eaten fresh and preserved as dried, smoked, salted, and frozen. But these photos were taken in the 1980s. Since then, the fish face serious extirpation by commercial ocean overfishing and bycatch, and then the discard of the ulican from the bycatch. There's been no ulican fishing in the coastal river in the Nuhawk Nation since 1996. Higher education and activism by 2 Nuhawk women has documented the problem and stimulated legal action to protect and return the fish from its current status as an endangered species. So that's just one example of how communities can resist threats and strengthen their food systems. Other examples of how to keep local food systems alive are to use intercultural education networks to document and teach the food systems of Indigenous people, to share seeds and traditions, to encourage youth with values for food traditions, and to build a future for their community, place a tax on junk food and resist ultra-processed food with education, through the schools, activate indigeneity to create food sovereignty and food security with Indigenous knowledge keepers, and learn the values of love and purpose for food traditions at all levels. And to create Indigenous intercultural food professionals, such as dietitians and chefs, to serve the community. They can be very important for building the culture around the traditional food systems. Importantly, is to share community experiences for strengthening food systems with local and international networks for agrobiodiversity, such as the FAO Global Hub on Indigenous Peoples, the Indigenous Terra Madre, and the Indigenous Partnership for Agrobiodiversity and Food Sovereignty. All very important for building our knowledge around Indigenous peoples' food systems. Thank you for your attention.
So thank you very much, dear Harriet. That was a very insightful presentation, and it inspired us how to document and strengthen Indigenous peoples' food systems. And also you mentioned about the impact of industrial fishing, how it can reduce the fish availability. So these are very important linkages that should be addressed. And also you give great examples what could be done, such as intercultural networks of education, sharing seeds, resisting ultra-processed foods, and activating indigeneity. So that could be something what should be done in future. So thank you very much. We should be now progressing to the Q&A session. I'm sorry that Alejandro had a problem with connections, but
I'm okay now.
Yeah, so Alejandro, if you just could briefly maybe say the key messages, what you are doing and what you would like to share, and then we will process the Q&A session.
Yeah, my apologies for that problem. That's the beauty of living in the countryside here in South America. But I think I just want to reaffirm some of the points that were mentioned, especially the right of Indigenous peoples to their own food sovereignty, which is intrinsically linked to the biocultural heritage of Indigenous peoples, and the spiritual relationship that was mentioned that we have with Mother Earth. And particularly, we like to highlight that all those points need to be linked to the rights established in the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. In these times of COVID, the aggravated biodiversity loss, species extinction, and ecosystem destruction that we see in the world, I think that we as members of ancient cultures who, as you have here, maintain a wealth of knowledge, practices, and strategies on how to live in harmony with Mother Earth. It's important that the voices of indigenous peoples are here and that false solutions that are presented, particularly in terms of benefit sharing, the climate crisis, the food system that's have presented recently at the food system summit that was led by corporate interest. We believe that those need to be scrutinized, and that we have to underline that without human rights, respect of human rights, and the end of violations of indigenous peoples and local communities, all these nice things that we hear won't be, won't flourish. Also, I think we need to reflect on how the industrialized agri-food system is creating more crises than helping to move towards or try to do food transition to a low carbon, more resilient food systems, and that needs to also again be linked to the wisdom of indigenous peoples, particularly of women and elders. So just let me finish by saying that modernization, it's on market solutions only are not going to solve the system. The indigenous food systems, as practiced at a local level, are key in solving not just like the food crisis, but also the climate crisis, so that we need to protect those biocultural systems at a local level, and have more specific plans that link rights to those technical solutions that we are proud of. I think I will leave it there. Unfortunately, my points were lost when I have this computer problem. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alejandro, for sharing these words of wisdom about the important role of indigenous communities for agrobiodiversity. We know you have done a lot of intercultural work in Peru, and thank you also for bringing this point, how important it is to focus on the rights of people to their land and culture, and that this could contribute to solving even the bigger issues such as climate change. So thank you very much, and we will now proceed to the Q&A session. So I will kindly ask my co-moderator Prem Mathur to hand over and start a discussion. Thank you everyone for your presentations, and Prem, you can go ahead.
Thank you, Lucas. First of all, let me take this opportunity to thank all our eminent speakers of this session for their excellent presentation and sharing their vast knowledge in various aspects relating to a specific role our indigenous people play towards conservation and use of agrobiodiversity. Your presentation has generated lots of interest among participants, and we have received several questions, clarification, and as well as some additional information relating to your presentation. Since the time is limited for this Q&A session here, I have picked only a few important questions which are very relevant to this session here. And for the rest of the question, we will pass on the respective speakers later on maybe. So let me start with the very important question here, that based on common observation, the new generation is losing interest in agriculture, which is also true with the indigenous people and local communities. That may result in loss of traditional knowledge. So do you think that this is happening? And if so, how should we keep interest of youth to continue transforming their traditional knowledge, which they have acquired from their elder generation? And I think I can request Harriet first to respond to this question. Harriet, please.
Okay, thank you. Well, of course, it's important to get the youth on board with their traditional food systems, but it is happening. It's happening with leadership, and it happens because of documentation and sharing of information. In the youth that I have encountered in many communities in North America, they really do appreciate having the scientific information on the qualities of their traditional food. For example, in the Arctic area, the question came up, well, where are these people who are eating all these animal foods? Where are they getting their vitamin C? Obviously, they don't have traditional fruits and vegetables providing vitamin C. Where is it coming from? And so that led to several experiments. And what we found is that, in fact, there is a great deal of vitamin C in the skin of some of their traditional food animals, which they make very good use of traditionally. And so this is something that now enters into the school system, and people are learning and getting more and more excited about the benefits and values scientifically of their traditional food. So as an educator, of course, I can't help but say that education is a very important principle. But it's vital to use common knowledge and common wisdom, and having different avenues for training youth, as has been documented by our speaker from Thailand. So there are many ways to do this. You have the elders participating, you have the community leaders participating, and there are on-site sessions of people, women teaching their children how to do the different processes with the traditional food. So I think education and leadership are the key, and helping to encourage the youth to go forward and maintain their food system and the social justice issues that are part of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Harriet. I fully agree with you that the education at the grassroots level is very, very important if we want to continue the tradition knowledge passing from generation to generation. Yeah. Maybe my next question I can address to Nudania.
Yes.
Based on your experience working with local communities, how traditional way of natural resources management through rotational agriculture could contribute to the COP26 goal of protecting local communities and habitats? This is in the context of COP26. We just last. Please.
Okay. About COP26. One of aim of COP26 is adapt to protect communities and natural habitat. And I think in current community we have in the case of in Thailand we very relate about this, and in current community we have a good practice in traditional management, and we work a lot about how we can save, can recover about traditional knowledge practice and in the community like that. And we put in Thailand we have a cabinet resolution of recovery the livelihood of current people like that, and to protect and to talk about rotational farming is have accept in the community can do the rotational farming, and we have a can use traditional land in our area like that. Yeah, and we do like a special cultural zone in our space like that, and we work with local government in the area to do like a GS mapping, to do about work customary law to use in community like that, and to declare the special cultural zone to promote the community can take care and manage area like that. And now we in Thailand we develop about the cabinet resolution to Indigenous People Act, and I think in the future, like 2 or 3 years, we will have this act to protect us, and we can use our traditional knowledge in our area like that.
Thank you very much, Lutania. Very important information from your side. We appreciate very much. And the next question is basically asking to my colleague Mopoloking. As you have nicely presented about your work on the community seed bank and local seed system, which is very, very important in terms of the involvement of community at the local grassroots level here. Based on your experience, what strategies you will like to adopt to enhance and encourage the development of community seed banks and local seed system, so more people and more community can be involved in that? So what are your thought about that? How to attract more community and more indigenous people into that kind of activities for local system and community seed bank and developing a kind of network? Please. You are muted. Can you unmute yourself?
Thank you, Prem, for your question. Yes, that is a very important question to address, or maybe to look at strategies that one, or how best can we get used to see that this is being adopted. Firstly, the great strategy would be to involve communities in realizing them, or making them to give them the decision makers. And also that they contribute on a larger part to be the one who are leading the construction of the establishment, even taking ownership of the management itself. This will also go together with strengthening collaborations, not within the agricultural sector alone, but also to invite the social development sectors, the justice sectors, to take a responsibility in making sure that they encourage, and on a larger part, to have conservation on its own as a module, perhaps in the curriculums of the universities or institutions that deals with education, for us to get the know-how from the grassroots level. And the most important role should come from now the government itself, where it brings the support of the finance on a heavily mode. And this will be with the expertise from the agricultural advisory services, where they will be giving the technical support at all time, and mainly to make sure that in all this, we don't forget the need identification of why CSBs has to be introduced to people. Why should it be the most important thing that will make sure that the seeds that we are trying to restore, it is not eroded? So in that essence, it will bring that situation whereby the resource mobilization on its own, it's all been attended to in different stages. Thank you so much.
Prem, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry. What specific role indigenous people can play in crop improvement, and what they expect from scientific communities and policy makers for their contribution here? And I will request if Alejandro is still there, because he has a lot of working experience with the communities and scientists in Andean mountain here. Maybe if he's there, can you?
I'm here.
Okay.
I think there's a critical question here. in the relationship and the collaboration between scientists and indigenous peoples. As I was underlining before, I think there is a big gap in terms of recognition by international institutes of this critical role that indigenous peoples play in conserving, diversifying, enriching this rich agrobiodiversity. Just look at the international institutes. The FAO Indigenous People Unit is not led by indigenous peoples. If you see Biodiversity International work on indigenous peoples, it's not led by indigenous peoples. So go to the World Bank, to the international, to the Inter-American Development Bank. Every big institution have, white people leading the work that indigenous people should be led. So in my view, from universities to international institutes that do science must include in the leadership indigenous peoples, so that that worldview, that vision of indigenous peoples is in practice, in the institution and in the work that those institutions do. At the local level, there is a lot of collaboration, but many of this still is extractive. People go with frameworks that only try to use taxonomies that come from science, scientific views, and try to apply them and use the word participation to kind of cover up this type of extraction. So we have a lot to go in this. Some efforts have been made. Yes, there is collaboration, yes, but there is still white supremacy and, use of the indigenous rights to keep dominating science, technology, and knowledge by scientists and not by indigenous peoples. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we still have 3 minutes to go. And I would like to ask one more question, which is from me. And it is open to all of you speakers, you can speak here. In the context of the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, in your views, what approach we should adopt so that policymakers acknowledge that indigenous peoples are custodians of biological and cultural diversity, and how we can ensure that indigenous people are included in decision-making process for management and ecosystem through conservation and use of agrobiodiversity? So this is the open question. I mean, anybody can start and anybody can supplement for that. We have just 3 minutes left, 2.5 minutes left. So who will take lead? Lutandia? Take lead? Or maybe Harriet?
Well, in my perspective, and watching how the UN works through the FAO hub is so impressive. I mean, I think the way to get this ball rolling is to get countries involved. I mean, if you have a buy-in from countries, then the word spreads. And once you have national leadership, you can use that leadership to build each country's traditional framework for moving forward. I mean, one thing to do is to encourage joint management processes for resources. This is happening in Canada for many of the wildlife and other resource management boards, where Indigenous peoples are invited to participate in that management. And so this is a national initiative. So I think the best way to make a big impact is to work through the UN and national leaderships to get Indigenous peoples involved and participating at that level.
Thank you very much, Harriet. And now I pass on to Lucas to move forward. If you have any question to ask and maybe to go on. Thank you very much for your participation.
Thank you, Prem. And there is the last 5 minutes now. So I think we will move forward to the conclusion to Mr. Frank Roy, who is the coordinator of the Indigenous Partnership.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Bafran.
Okay, sorry. Let me just, all right. Sorry if I'm looking at the wrong end. I've got my computer a bit messed up. Today is the last of the 3 sessions dedicated by the International Agrobiodiversity Congress for Indigenous Peoples Food Systems. The Indigenous Partnership for Agrobiodiversity and Food Sovereignty is an Indigenous organization that is hosted by Biodiversity. And we are great, Biodiversity, the Alliance of Biodiversity International and SEAT. We are grateful for being asked to organize these 2 sessions. And I'm particularly grateful to Lucas from the Indigenous Partnership, to Prem, Eshan, and others within the Alliance, to Ivan of ETH Zurich, and for all the work that they have done in the last few months in preparing for these great meetings. I'm also grateful to FAO, Indigenous Peoples Unit, for the support, and also what Harriet had mentioned earlier, the Global Hub on Indigenous, the Global Hub on Indigenous Peoples Food Systems. We are proud of our decisions also to have young speakers in yesterday's and today. Speakers like Pitakia from Solomon Islands, Resha Dakhar from Northeast India, Roba from Ethiopia, and today Jam from Northern Thailand as speakers. We're grateful that these young people are being supported by well-known researchers like Dr. Francisco, Dr. Orozo, Professor Anil Gupta, Professor Harriet, Professor Dr. Mopol Ken, and Alejandro, Dr. Alejandro, who shared their reflections with us. Getting the voices of Indigenous peoples to be part of this International Agrobiodiversity Congress has been a landmark position. And I want to especially thank Jan Lucas, the Director General of the Alliance of Biodiversity International and SEAT, and for the group of staff like Danny, Hunter, Eshan, Michael Harewood, Teresa Borelli, who have always been consistently supporting us and who have a firm commitment to the work that we do with Indigenous peoples. We hope to see more and more of this. In the last 2 sessions that we have had, we were presented with data. We were presented with examples why